Welcome to the Romantasy Library.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Romantasy Library. I'm your host, Kate Perkins, and today I am interviewing Kara Douglas, romantic fantasy author. She wrote Lunaria and Illuminance, which is book 2 in the series, and then Undying Lands will be coming out in October 17th. And is that like a novella in the series?
It was supposed to start as a novella. That was the plan. It's 2.5. It's kind of a prequel to the stories, but it's best read after book 2. But it's more of a story in the series now because it's a lot longer than a novella should be.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I can't wait to hear more about that one too. So yeah, Kara, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Good. It's really good to be here. It's been chaotic. I know we were talking a little bit about the move and things like that. I just bought my first house. Me and my husband, we've been married just over a year now. So we just bought our first house. We moved out of our apartment. We have a yard for our dog. So we are slowly getting used to everything.
Yeah, and congratulations, a year into the marriage. How's that been?
It's
Good.
been really chaotic and crazy, like with the book stuff going on and working and
Oh,
all of that, but it's been really good. Yeah.
I can only imagine. And moving can be so stressful.
Yes, it's so
Oh
stressful.
my word. Yeah, but you're loving your new home?
Yes, we love not having to walk our dog, not having to go up a flight of stairs to get in with the groceries is really nice as well. We have
Sure.
good neighbors and everything, so it's good.
That's awesome. Were you guys in an apartment before?
Yes, we were on the second story of our apartment, so we had to constantly go up and down stairs. We had people above us and below us.
I've been there before. So this is a big deal too. So you just bought a house.
Yes, yep, our first house.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah,
So you got married and you wrote 2 books
yes, I did.
and you work. That is a lot, Kara. How do you navigate all of that?
That is a really good question. I don't know how. It's a lot of late nights, a lot of Alanis and coffee. It's definitely the first book was different because I wasn't really marketing during the first book at all. So I was just writing, I was just in my own little space, and it definitely got more difficult into book 2 because now you're, marketing, you're talking to readers, and it just definitely like went up a new level when book 2 came out.
Yeah. I'm so excited to gush about these books with you. I love this series and I can't wait for the 2.5 book, Undying Lands, to come out in October.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want to give like a brief overview or like a synopsis about your books?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, only the first 2 books in the series are out right now. But in general, the series it kind of follows a badass female main character. She's stuck living in a military training camp in book 1. In general, it's a new adult series, so there is open door spice, there's political intrigue, slow burn romance, there's more adult elements to it. So there's, grief and anxiety and depression. There's just different, heavier topics that come up in the new adult that doesn't come up as much in YA in detail. And then book 1, Lunaria, it's similar to Bachelor in Paradise meets Rain. I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show Rain or Bachelor in Paradise, but
No, but that's hysterical. So
yes.
yeah, no, I don't get it. I don't know those references. I haven't seen
Well,
it.
have you watched The Bachelor before?
Oh,
It's like all like a bunch of women and one man or back
yes.
and forth. The Bachelor in Paradise is a bunch of the old contestants all get together on the beach together, and they all date each other. So it's very similar vibes to just like Bachelor in Paradise if you've ever seen it. And then book 2 is more of like Alice in Wonderland meets Game of Thrones. So there's definitely a whole shift that happens going into book 2, but
Yeah.
yeah.
As you were going into like writing these books, did you already have this inspiration in mind, or did it kind of were those your inspirations for writing?
Honestly, I didn't think about any of those until like way after, and I was in the marketing phase of things because, like I said, with book 1, I was in the middle of planning a wedding, and I decided to start writing just because I wanted something to do that wasn't planning a wedding. So I just started planning a wedding. So I really didn't have any expectations when I went into it. I just started writing, like really just opened up a Word doc and started writing it, which is just crazy. So there really was no like, let me see what I can compare it to. There was no like forethought before I started writing the first book.
That is amazing. So are you a pantser?
I am. I really want to be a plotter so bad. Like I would love to just like
Right.
sit down and
Yeah.
plot it and have a nice little outline. And I've tried. Going in Canva and making it pretty and laminating it and printing it. I've tried note cards and Post-its, and like I'm not going to stick to any of it. So I'm definitely a pantser, unfortunately.
No, that's great. I mean, fortunately, because I love this series and it flows so nicely. So the pantsing works for you.
Yes, it definitely. I've tried the plotting, but it does
Yeah.
not work. It's the pantsing is. I feel like it boxes my creativity in a little bit when I try to force something. So I know where
Mhm.
the book is going, but I definitely pants the entire way to the ending, pretty much.
That is incredible because the series is pretty complex. Like there are a lot of moving parts.
Well,
So
that's
you,
because I always have to rewrite it because I pants it. So I usually will pants and then sit down with my developmental editor that I've had since book one, and we will go through it and we're like, yeah, this needs a whole rewrite because I didn't plot anything. I just started writing.
yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. So it sounds like the plotting aspect of it, you feel kind of boxed in creatively. And so the pantsing allows you to like flow, so to speak, or what do you appreciate about the pantsing?
I think it's just sometimes the characters tell me where they want to go, and I might have an idea of what I want them to do, and then as I'm writing it, like it sounds so crazy, but they don't want to do that. They don't want to go there, and they don't want to do this scene that I'm thinking could work, and I'll end up taking scenes out or moving them to a different book and things like that. So I think I just enjoy letting the story, kind of tell me where it wants to go, because
Yeah.
usually if I try to plan it, it does not work out that way.
That is so interesting. And talking with other authors, they've said, other authors have said something similar in terms of letting the characters drive it a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely is. I feel like there's a lot of things that they kind of yell at me that they want to do, and some I will message my editor all the time, but I'll have some characters that I weren't expecting to flirt, and all of a sudden they'll start flirting, and I'm like, "What are you doing, flirting with her? Like you're not supposed to be with her," and that always makes me laugh because they do, and I'm like, "Why did they just start flirting with her? They're not supposed to do that."
I don't know. I find the whole process so fascinating, like how writers create and compose these stories and create these amazing character arcs. And anyway, I think that's really interesting. For Lunaria and Illuminance, what what compelled you to start writing? Because I know that you said that you have a job. Like, can you walk us through that? Like, what compelled the writing process for you?
Yeah, so my day job has nothing to do with writing. I work in healthcare, I work in a hospital. So by trade, I'm an occupational therapist. So I really have not like done anything with writing. I'm not a teacher. Like I don't do anything when it comes to like any kind of writing process. Because I work in patient care, very hands-on patient care. So I work in admissions now, but in the time of writing, I was in occupational therapy. So like the process of starting to write and deciding to write a book and become an author, like I didn't grow up writing. It's not like something that I've always dreamed of doing, or I like grew up, writing books or anything like that. I wrote like poetry in high school and English class, like like very nothing that I ever did. It's kind of more of I've always been a reader than I've been a writer. So whenever I was planning my wedding back in 2022, I said, you know what? I need something to do for myself. Like, I am planning all the time. And it's crazy. So let me just write a book.
Let me just write a book. When wedding planning is so stressful in and of itself, holy moly. That is
Yes.
incredible.
It's so, and it was, you're right. It's so stressful. It's so just like you're always doing 10 million different things, buying things. And the reason a lot of people love to read is, it takes you to another world. You get to, kind of escape into a different life for a little bit, which was needed in healthcare and COVID and, doing the wedding stuff and like all of that. So I was like, okay, well, let's just start writing and see what happens. And I really didn't expect it to go anywhere or even to like publish the book. So that's kind of the crazy thing is I wasn't even planning. I was like, you know what, this is just going to be for me. I'm not going to tell anybody. And I didn't even tell my fiance at the time until I was like pretty much done with the book. Nobody.
That is amazing. So were you like, hey, I just wrote a book and I'm going to be publishing it?
Yes, because I remember telling him, and I was typing away on my computer, and he was like, what are you always doing?" And I was like, "Well, I wrote a book." And he was like, "What do you mean you wrote a book?" And I was like, I just wrote a book the past couple months."
That is hysterical. Kara, I have goosebumps. That is insane. So you've been primarily a reader, and then you were like, I want to do this thing for you.
Yeah, and I've always enjoyed like English class and things like that. Even in college, like my major was in biology. Like it was nothing to do with the writing. I didn't do any kind of like creative writing other than like your normal like freshman classes that you have to take. So it really is like the most unexpected thing that now has become my entire life, but it just like really came out of nowhere, honestly.
Oh, I love that so much. That's so great. So with occupational therapy, can I just ask what age group do you work with, or what
Yeah.
is?
So I work in adults. I'm in geriatrics mostly. Um, so I work with acute inpatient rehab hospital. So we have a lot of our hospital is stroke, amputee, and hip certified. So we work with a lot of that population. We mostly have probably age group wise, like 50 to 75 is probably pretty normal for us.
Wow.
So we do a lot of spinal cord injuries, amputees, strokes, things like that. It's intensive rehab, so the patients are getting really intense rehab. We're kind of a step down in between leaving the hospital and going home. So they're not safe enough to go home yet medically, and they usually need a little bit more help before they end up going home. But they're, you know, they only are with us for about 14 days. So it's a short term, intense rehab.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an intense job. Like that is a lot. That's heavy. So yes, I'm a therapist, and one of my clients, I've had a couple clients that work in a similar field or whatever, and just hearing their stories of like working with that population, it would be really hard.
Yeah, definitely, especially during COVID too. When COVID hit, it changed everything for everybody. But our hospital had a lot of COVID patients, and so you would be treating in their room. Usually, we have this, big gym we treat patients in, but then you had to treat them in their room. They couldn't see their family members for the whole time they were there. They just left a hospital and couldn't see their family, and you had to wear, your mask and all of your face stuff, and so they weren't seeing any other faces other than your eyes, and it was just a lot. It was definitely a difficult time for sure in healthcare.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then especially with that age, if they've had a stroke, like if they are disoriented, like that might be a little scary for them. I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely, especially because we have some patients who have dementia and some who sundown and get really confused at nighttime. So it definitely is like usually we have family members that can visit and be in there and help, kind of keep them comfortable and have a familiar face. But, it was very different during COVID.
Oh my goodness, I can only imagine. Yeah, I worked for a little bit on a geriatric unit at a psych hospital. So that is just, it tugs your heartstrings. Yeah, that's really commendable. So had you always wanted to go into OT, occupational therapy, or how did you get into that?
So I pretty much that's what I've always wanted to do from high school, going into college. Like I knew my sister is a nurse.
Okay.
So I've always been around healthcare a lot. Um, and so I knew going into college, that's what I wanted to do. When I started, I knew that's, this is what I'm going to be doing. So like, it really like my life was planned out. I had, I had everything what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And then writing came in and said, never mind, we have something new we want to do.
Yeah, that's so incredible. So how did this idea come to you?
I feel like this is always the hardest question to me for some reason, because there's no like big moment. There was no like dream or like big aha, or it was really just, honestly, I thought of the ending first, and I don't even know what I was doing at the time, probably driving, because I feel like I always get ideas when I'm driving for some reason.
Cool.
But I was just like, you know what if one of the male characters in the book did this to the main female character? Like, what if he did this to her at the end of the book and this was like a big reveal or something? And so then I said, well, this would be kind of cool. Like, how would the book have to start to get to that point? And then I had a lot of ideas, and I was like, you know what, let's just like type up a little idea in my phone, like my notes section. And then it really just like snowballed very quickly from there.
Oh, that's so incredible. And like you said earlier, you're more of a pantser, so it makes sense of like it's interesting that you knew more of like what the ending was going to look like, and then you just started writing. That's incredible.
Yeah.
What a
and
story.
that's something that stayed with me surprisingly for all of the books, as I know how every book is going to end in the series, which is like, I know like what the last like reveal is going to be. Like I know the ending to all of my books, but like the start, like where do I start the book? How do I get to the midpoint? Like all of that is something I usually have to struggle to figure out, but I always know the ending somehow.
Yeah, that's incredible. And how many books will there be?
So there's 4 in the main series, and then a 5th will be 2.5. So that one's to be read in the main series, but there's going to be some spinoffs too. But those will be standalone connected to the series. So those won't have to be read in the main series. So there's really 5 kind of in the main series.
Okay. Yeah, the end of Illuminance, I was like, what is happening? What just happened?
Which is, like, I hate cliffhangers as a reader. Like, I get so mad at cliffhangers, and I'm just, like, typing away, and I'm like, haha, let me write this cliffhanger.
You, like, wrote a big cliffy.
Yeah, I did.
You're for hating cliffhangers.
I really did.
Yes. It was so good, though. I was like, it's so interesting as, like, the story progresses and more information, like, comes to light. It's like, oh, my gosh, the story's getting bigger and bigger, and I can't wait to see where it goes.
Yeah, it definitely expands with every book. So book 1, actually, when I was first writing it, it wasn't going to be a fantasy series, which is crazy when you read book 2 because it, like, clearly is a fantasy series. Like, it's meant to be. But when I was first writing it, I was like, maybe this can just be like a historical romance. Like, I'm kind of scared to get into the fantasy and like have to figure out world building. Like, it's just overwhelming, and I just wasn't sure, how to do that, if it would work. And then it fit so easily once I decided to finally take the leap into fantasy. So it was definitely meant to be written that way. But it's interesting how it didn't start being fantasy.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I can imagine that it can feel a little intimidating as you're writing a fantasy or a romantic fantasy of having the magical world building and making sure that you've got all of the rules laid out, or I don't know. Is that the piece that feels the most intimidating, is the world building, or are there other components that feel intimidating with fantasy?
I feel like it started off being the most intimidating to me. I have a really, really awesome developmental editor, and she sometimes I feel like knows my world better than I do. she just is so wonderful, and helps keep me in check a lot. So I'm just like super disorganized. So I think for me, just like organizing my world, making sure I'm keeping things like consistent throughout the books, because it's so easy to forget, one little line that you wrote in the last book that'll change, the entire book that you're writing currently. So I think that is probably one of the harder parts when it comes just to the writing process, is just making sure that I'm keeping the fantasy consistent. And fantasy readers too have a certain expectation. And so it's just making sure that, you're staying true to your fantasy world, and the characters are, doing the things that they would be doing. And that's probably the hardest part, is just the consistency of it.
Sure. Do you have a world Bible? I know some authors have created something like that, but
yeah. So I am so disorganized, and I'm so messy. My car is always like messy. Everything. I never make my bed.
Girl, you and I are so similar. My husband is always complaining about how messy I am. Is your husband?
He's very clean. I feel like they always mirror each other.
That is so funny. My husband's like, I'm not dirty. I just disorganized.
Just a little it's ADHD. Some you just leave the next thing. It's fine. So that is very similar to the way that I write and world build too. And so like all of my notes are like scattered. I like have stuff in my notes section of my phone. I use like Milanote for some stuff. I use like Word docs for other things. Like it would be great if it was all in one place, but a lot of times it's like all over the place.
I think I would be pretty similar too with that. That is, well, and the fact that you've kept everything consistent throughout both books is phenomenal. I mean, it all comes together, and your process is your process. And it's interesting how earlier you were saying that you really wanted to be a plotter, but your process just works for you.
Yeah.
And you've created such a fun series.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then earlier in the conversation, you were saying that some scenes got deleted. I think you said something like that, or moved to a different book. Can you share?
Yeah. So I am actually in the middle of doing that with my work in progress. So with Undying Lands, it's beta readers have it now. I just finished it not that long ago, and beta readers are working through it now. So there's this one scene in particular that is happening between the main couple in this book that doesn't, as I'm going back and reading it, and I'm like, this scene does not belong to this couple. Like reading it back, I'm like, you know what? This is like not something that this couple would do. And it's spicy, but it's not like they're spicy, So it's interesting going back and reading it. And I'm like, this fits so much better with a different couple that I have. So I think that's
interesting.
Yeah. It is. As soon as I read it, I was like, oh no, like this doesn't belong to these characters. Why are they doing this?
Can you share what couple you're talking about?
So for the couple for Undying Lands, so, well, about to say spoiler for the listeners who haven't read.
Spoiler, everybody.
Yes.
Proceed with caution.
Yes. So for Undying Lands, if you read the blurb on Amazon, so this isn't, a surprise spoiler or anything, but it's for Lunaria's parents, for her mother and father. It's their story, their backstory, how they came about. So it's those two, Damon and Evelina. So those are the two that it's between.
At the end, I was like, what the heck? How? I wanted to know how that happened.
Yes.
And she was being pretty cryptic. Sorry, go ahead.
No, she is cryptic. She definitely, when you read through the story, it'll make sense, but it's their story and there is just a certain scene. So it's obvious there's going to be a spicy moment between them. There has to be because they conceived Lou. So like, something's going to happen. But there is something that they do in this scene. And I was just like, oh no, this is not them. Right. This is not for them.
I can't wait for this to come out. I feel like fall is going to be a really great reading season.
Yes, and this was originally supposed to be released in July, actually. Okay. That was just what my personal goal was, and then everything, got crazy with the house, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to push it back because honestly, this feels like a fall read anyways, and so I was like, you know what, let's just make it a fall read. Like we love a fall read.
I love a fall read. Oh, I can't wait.
Hey guys, and now time for another ad. Welcome to Callie and Maddie Designs, where fantasy meets fashion. Callie is the owner and designer, creating wearable merch inspired by our favorite fantasy books and beloved authors like Sarah J. Maas, K.A. Tucker, Penn Cole, who has been featured on this podcast. I'm so excited about that. Sarah A. Parker, who will also be on this podcast. I cannot wait, and Kara Douglas, and so many more. Every design is officially licensed by the authors, and Callie even works directly with them on designs for officially licensed designs, which I think is a really big deal. All of Callie's designs come from a pure book-loving mind, as she only designs for books that she feels passionately about. Guys, her designs are so cute. I have a couple shirts coming in for the Fate and Flame series by K.A. Tucker. I cannot wait, and I also have a Sarah A. Parker shirt coming in, which I cannot wait to wear and show off. If you guys are interested in checking out her website, you can use my code Romantasy10 to purchase something for 10% off, whatever you like. All of her designs are super cute. I highly recommend. It's Callie and Maddie Designs. She's on Instagram, and you can find all of her info there. Thanks, guys, and now back to the show.
Yeah, I am so interested because with Lunaria's sister and how her sister has talked about like her dad's relationship with Evelina.
Mhm.
Like it just feels like that was her true love. I mean, based on how it's all been written, but I'm
Yeah.
like, gosh, yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. It'd be really interesting to see.
Yeah, it's always fun doing podcasts and people asking questions because I have to remind myself what the readers don't currently
I
know.
know. So all of this might be like spoiler what I just said. Who knows?
No, well, no, it's just like people will ask me questions. Like, for instance, in my Discord, a reader will say something, and I'll start typing out the title to book three, and then I have to backspace really quick, and I'm like, no, I have to say book three. Nobody knows the title of book three yet. So I do that all the time. I'm not a good secret keeper at all.
Well, that's hard. I mean, especially when you're so excited about your series and you love your, I'm assuming you love your characters and everything that you've created. It's probably, I would have a hard time keeping everything contained and secret.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what was it like after, because initially when you wrote Lunaria, um, it was just going to be for fun. So then what was that process like of deciding, okay, I'm going to publish this and then actually publishing it?
Yeah, it was such a crazy, like, I wrote it, and whenever I got to the end, I was like, okay, well, these characters like deserve for me to like do something with them. Like, even if, my mom and my husband read it and that's it, and my sister, like, if that's all that reads it, that's totally fine. Like, they just deserve to be out in the world somehow. So I have a few friends from college that I knew that had self-published as well. They are totally different genres. And so they like their reader base is totally different. They're both guys too. So like they
Different
write
vibe.
books for guys. First, it's not for the girlies. So
Totally.
yeah. Yeah, totally different vibe, but they had self-published, so they gave me some pointers on you know how do you get a cover artist? How do you get an ISBN? How do you go about like all of the ins and outs of it? I did a lot of researching and watching YouTube and things like that. But at least I had somebody that I could go to and ask for these kinds of questions. And they got me connected with an editor and with a cover artist and things like that. So it kind of started with them. And because, I was curious. I was just like, well, what do you do? Because y'all have self-published. So like, what does the process look like? And then once they started telling me what's involved with it, I was like, well, I owe it to my characters to like do something with them. And then when it got to the point of picking a cover artist and having someone make the map, I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I might as well like actually do it. I might as well like actually post about it and see like if 10 people read it. That was my goal, was to have 20 people that I didn't know to read my book. That was my like original goal, which is crazy. So
You've
it
still
kind of,
exceeded that. That's amazing.
yeah, that was like, still I have to remind myself all the time is, when I started this, that my goal was 20 people that I didn't know and did like not a friend or a family member, just to like decide to read my book. So it's just kind of crazy how much it's come since last August.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I love your covers.
Thanks.
I ordered it through I have two like paperback. I have the paperback copies coming and I ordered it through my local bookstore. And so I'm waiting for it to come or I would be showing everybody right now. But I love the covers. They're so pretty.
Yeah, that's one of the things for me is like I have a lot of trophy books, like all of my like special editions, and I like
Yes.
books that are pretty. And so that was especially with the covers, I wanted them to mean something too. So book one is a really heavy botanical
Mhm.
theme throughout it, and then book two is a heavy like celestial lunar. So there's the moon on the front of book two, and all of them I wanted to have some type of meaning to them too, but also like I want them to be cute.
Yeah, they are cute. I think they're really pretty. I can't wait to get mine. And I'm excited to see what Undying Lands, what that cover is going to look like.
Yes, I have a really awesome cover artist. I have a different one for Undying Lands, and she did a really fabulous job with it.
Yeah, so interesting. This is kind of a random question. As you were talking, I was wondering, do the names like of the characters mean anything?
So book one, another spoiler. So proceed with caution if you're listening and haven't read book 2 or the end of book 1 because it's the very end of book 1. But we know for those who have read book 1, Lou Amira becomes Lunaria. So Lunaria is a flower. It's the flower, the pods that are on the front cover of book 1.
Yeah.
So Lunaria is the same. Like if you look it up, it's those like silver goldish like pods that they have. The names, especially Lou's name, is it's really big because if you look at some of the like lore when it comes to the Lunaria flower, it's also called the money plant. So we know her father is like, or her supposed father is obsessed with, money, and that's like all he cares about. And there's just a lot of really heavy lore when it comes to the Lunaria flower and how it's, charmed to be protection against evil spirits. Like it's got a whole like host of really interesting information about the Lunaria flower. So her name definitely is like very heavily consistent with some things if you look up what the Lunaria flower means.
Okay, I'm gonna have to do that.
Yeah. For book 1, all of the chapter titles are flowers.
Okay, I was gonna ask you. I literally was gonna ask you about the chapter titles for both books. Actually, I was like, okay, what is the meaning? Because there has to be a meaning here.
Yes, there definitely is a meaning. It's one of those things where a reader probably isn't gonna like necessarily see it and know to like how to find it, but it's like something that I did Easter egg for myself. But so all the chapter titles are like botanical like full names, and if you look and see what they mean symbolically, it follows what the like symbolism for that chapter is. So a lot of those flowers have like specific meanings. I have this little like flowerology book, and it's got different.
So cool! I have goosebumps. That's so fun.
It's so small, and like if you go and look, some of them the meaning will vary depending on like what source you're looking at. But all of the chapter titles have a meaning that goes along with the symbolism of that flower.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so interesting.
Yeah,
I love that. What were the chapter? Can you share what the chapter titles meant or mean or whatever for book 2?
Yes. So this is something I did at the literally at the very end, right before it was supposed to go to betas. I was trying to figure out, what type of like stars, moon, like what would be consistent with that theme to be chapter titles, because that's such a heavy influence for book 2. And then I was like, well, none of these stars that we know like really are symbolic. They have usually stories behind them, not like a specific meaning. So I said, I'll just make my own constellation. I'll just make my own stars up. So I just made an entire constellation in the front of Illuminance. You'll see it says the constellations and the stars that go with each constellation, and a lot of them have to do with one of the gods or goddesses in the world. So it's kind of like, I don't even know where it came from. At the very end, I did it.
Oh, I love that. I must have missed that in my Kindle somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like it's easier to miss it in a Kindle because sometimes it starts when you open it.
Yeah,
at, like closer to the chapter start.
I'm gonna have to go back and look at that. That is so cool. So you are so creative, Kara.
You know what? And it's so funny, like hearing that, I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, no, I'm not creative.
Oh my God, Queen! I'm just amazed. I'm in awe that you were like, yeah, I want to write a book, and then you wrote this awesome series.
Yeah. It's really crazy thinking about, what my life was before, because now I feel like that's all that I do and like all that I talk about. And I have these whole new like group of friends through like Instagram and Discord and things like that. So it really is so much more than I thought it would be.
That is so cool. Are there other authors who you have connected with like through Bookstagram?
Oh, yeah. I feel like this is probably my favorite part of being an author and writing a book and publishing is meeting all of these people, because there's so many. Like I probably could list like 20 of them off that there's a lot that I talk to like pretty much every single day. There's like, we just talk so much, and they're so welcoming, and I feel like it's so easy to connect with readers and with other authors. And so there's a ton of them. Like, gosh, there's so many. Penn Cole is one of them. She's incredible. Sheila Masterson. There's so many. Amelia J. Tay Rose. Vanessa, VB Lacey. We might have
Yes.
to edit her real name out. I don't want to dox her, but
Okay.
VB
So
Lacey
interesting.
is
I've interviewed several of those, and she did say Vanessa, and then we said
okay.
pen name VB, so it's fine.
Yes.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
do think the community is really supportive, truly.
Yeah. It definitely
And pretty
feels that way
positive.
because
Yeah.
when I went in, I was like, you know what, no one's going to be, no one's going to care about my book. How do you make people, interested in your book? And it really
Mm.
just came from having readers that supported me so much. And they really just were like my biggest cheerleaders. And that's where I like really realized like, you know what, I want to do this. Like I want to write more books and write a whole series. And
Yeah, that's so cool. So the first book, Lunaria, you didn't do a whole lot of marketing for, and then Illuminance, the second book you did. Like, what was that process then like of like, okay, so you wrote this book and then you kind of put it out into the world and then yeah, like how was that comparatively with like doing a bunch of marketing for book two?
yeah, it definitely is different because with book one, I really was like kind of newish to Bookstagram, and I really like did a cover reveal and ARC signups and a few posts. I did a few reels and things like that, but it really
Okay.
wasn't until this book one came out in August, so maybe closer to like October 2023 is when things kind of ramped up a little bit, and I really started like posting graphics and like trying to be creative with my posts. And I think it definitely takes more of brain space than I anticipated for it to take up because you spend so much creativity on writing your book and then you have to use it on also
Mm-hmm.
creating content. So it's
And you're
hard.
already working. So are you working full time like every day too? And then doing this? Oh my word.
Yeah, I work like a normal 8 to 5 during the week, and then I usually work weekends too. So there's time squished in at the end of the day for my author. It feels like I have 4 jobs sometimes.
Oh my gosh, you work weekends too? Like
Mhm.
PRN, like as needed, or is it just like scheduled?
Yeah, it's usually as needed. I worked a lot
Okay.
of weekends planning for the wedding because I was like, you know what, I want extra money for the wedding. Like I'll do weekend stuff, and then I kept doing weekends, and so I'm still doing weekends.
That is incredible. Oh my gosh, Kara. Yeah. And as you're writing these characters, can I ask which character has been the most fun writing?
Oh man, the most fun to write.
I
That's
know that was like a short turn from what we were
I
talking about.
know. No, it is. It's different because there's characters that I feel like are harder to write than others, and there's some that just come really easily and they're fun.
Mhm. Okay,
Um,
so what are those? Yeah, what are those? The
so the
hardest.
hard ones, the difficult ones, are probably like the main character. So like Lou, she's a hard character to write, just because she's so closed off. She doesn't want to be vulnerable. She's so like stubborn. So it's hard to just like be in her head all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and
She
then
is, but she's also sorry to cut you off. I also feel like she's has like such a strong loyalty, like streak in her personality, right? Like, I don't
yeah,
know.
for sure.
Like
Yeah,
with
she
some of
definitely does.
interesting. Yeah. Hmm,
Yeah, she
okay.
definitely has strong loyalty, especially when she doesn't open up and trust people easily, but when she does, it's like, you're with
Yeah.
her. Like she's gonna
Yeah.
she's gonna be your person. So Lou, she can be hard to write sometimes. And then in book 2.5, Evelina, she is probably the character that's most like me.
Mm.
So she's hard to write just because like there's a lot of myself that I connect with in her too. So there's a level of needing to look into yourself and say like I'm gonna look like into my mess because this is like similar to my character's mess and the things that she's struggling with. And so there's a compatibility with Evelina, I feel like more than probably any of my other characters. So she's just hard to write because sometimes you want to be away from that. But she's a difficult one. She's
Yeah.
hard. Yeah.
You resonate with like she feels closest to you in
Yeah,
terms
which is interesting because she like that whole book is in third person,
of
and book one and two are first person, and the rest of the series will be in first person too because Lou obviously like she'll stay first person, but Undying Lands is in third, so I thought it would be more of a disconnect writing in third, and I feel like it was honestly the opposite for it. And it's dual POV, so Undying Lands is both the male character and the female character. So it was honestly easier for me to write his point of view, which is surprising, than it was for me to write hers, I would say.
Yeah, that is really interesting. So what about her do you feel like you said sort of stepping into your mess a little bit? If you don't
Yeah.
mind sharing a little bit more about that.
I think this isn't a huge spoiler because it's in a lot of the like blurbs and my tropes and things, because it's one of the like tropes is healer soldier arc. So Evelina is a healer in it, which is very compatible with my life. So that's one of the easy things for me to kind of connect on with her, is she does a lot of, things that a nurse would do, things that's kind of like her modern day comparison,
Mhm.
which I'm not a nurse at all, but my sister's a nurse and I'm close with a lot of nurses. A lot of my best friends are. So being in that processing of seeing a patient in pain, seeing, the things that other people struggle with and needing to be their rock for them. But, you're also dealing with stuff, but like that's not important when there's someone else hurting in front of you too. So
Yeah, she seems pretty nurturing.
yeah,
Like,
she's very like light, nurturing. It's a really interesting difference between her and Damon, because she's very light. We know she's the queen. We know that, she's very kind and soft. And we know at the end of Illuminance, spoiler alert for those who don't know, but the end of Illuminance, that he is the Lord of Shadows, which is this like dark, like bad characters. Like they have very polarizing characteristics.
that's so interesting. Because it's so interesting because in Illuminance, I feel like she was displayed as a very kind, nurturing, a great leader. She also, there were some moments where she was like fiercely protective of like her family. I'm excited for it to go a little bit deeper in Undying Lands because I feel like that is just one side of her. I feel like she's probably pretty multifaceted, and I'm
Yeah.
excited to see what the other side looks like and
Yeah.
maybe some of the mess as you called it.
Yeah, and that's really not completely her personality in Undying Lands. So
Okay.
a lot of the way she is now that we see her in current
Okay.
timeline, we see what shapes her to be that way, because she is not completely that personality in a lot of Undying Lands.
Interesting.
Yeah, she's a little different in Undying Lands.
Very interesting. Yeah. And how was it like writing these different like couples? Like in Lunaria and I guess with
hmm
Damon and Evelina. So that's a couple. So yeah, what was it like writing those like couple dynamics?
I think it is one of those things that it's you figure it out. Well, at least for me, I figure it out sometimes after I write things. And like I said, with that scene that I will probably be changing around, I'll go back and read it and realize it's not consistent with their character. Um, so it's interesting to have to like figure out what's going to be like true to that character. Like how would they respond to this situation if they're fighting with each other, how would Damon react that's true to him? And how would Evelina react? And is she going to be nurturing and, patient and quiet with him? Is she going to be angry? Like, what's going to be her go to emotion for certain things? And I think that's probably the hardest thing with character dynamics, because Lou and Illuminance aren't really like romance forward books. It's more like character and world building, and it's not really romance forward. But Undying Lance is like the plot is romance pretty much. So that was harder for me because I'm not used to writing so many romance dynamics, and the fighting, like when did they get from this point to this point, when did they make up, like what does it look like when they're angry with each other. So that was a lot harder for Undying Lands, because it's the romance aspect and the romance arc is just completely different.
So different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense that the first two books are not romance like driven. I mean, I think there's a lot of like foundation that you were laying out and like story, character development, right? And world building and all the different complexities that go into that. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot there that you like cover. But I was wondering because there is a spicy scene though that happens in
Yeah.
Illuminance.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was so good. I was like, finally.
I love a
God.
good slow burn, so you can
Oh my
always
God.
expect you to drag it out.
This was a slow burn and the payoff was great. So
Good.
yeah, I was like, oh yes.
Yes.
So yeah, I was curious like what that was like writing those scenes and that is interesting that Undying Lands is going to be a little bit more romance forward, which I'm excited to see how that what that's like reading that in comparison to the other ones, the other two.
Yeah, it's very different because it's, with writing Lunaria, there's not any spice. It's like a couple of kisses that are
Yeah.
very peachy. It's very chill. And then going into book two, open door romance, I was like, okay, mom, like chapter 51, like if you don't want to read me reading this, I was kind of nervous. I was like, skip over this chapter. And now I'm like, okay, I'll put a spice scene here. I'll put a spice scene here. So it's
Love it.
definitely gotten, the more comfortable that I've gotten with
Sure.
writing in general, it's figuring out those dynamics. It's like, well, this needs to happen like right now. Like I can't put it off.
Love it. How would you describe Graylin and some of these like I'm just curious from your perspective, how would you describe him?
Yeah. I feel like he's one of those characters who, it seems like he's really flirty with Lou. Like he only cares about like the lust aspect of it. Like that's all he really cares about. But for him, I feel like he's really good at reading people because that's kind of his job for a long time in all of book one, is like being able to read people. And, obviously like he has a task to be doing while he's there. So I feel like he's just really good at reading through what people aren't saying, because he's kind of quiet. Like he's not necessarily like, a big personality. So I feel like for him, he knows that Lou probably isn't going to open up emotionally. And so when she is struggling and she's having a lot of anxiety, and her anxiety kind of presents with her just like shutting down and not really wanting to open up, he knows that he can get her out of that bad headspace by distracting her.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting because it seems like he only cares about, the physical aspect of things, but for him, I feel like he really can read that she isn't going to open up.
Yeah, I feel like for him it's sort of like waters run deep a little bit. Like
Yeah.
there's some deepness. Deepness? He has some depth.
It's in depth. Yeah.
uh, did you like for these characters, did you have inspiration from any like real relationships in your life?
I feel like there was probably some. I don't think that this is always interesting for me because I feel like I don't do it intentionally. I don't
Uh-huh.
say like, I love this person, I want to write them into my book. It's more of like a subconscious writing that happens when I'm doing it. Some of it is cathartic and, exploring relationships that have pain associated with them. Some of them are fun. Like I am a younger sister to a very fierce older sister. So that is probably one of the like,
Interesting.
yes, that's probably one of the easiest dynamics when you read Illuminance. It's, I am the younger sister, like I am Lou in in some of those things because she is like a very like fierce, strong, like she's very protective. So it's one of those like
Hmm.
she like I'm a little scared of her. She's really tiny and short, but like I'm a little bit scared of her.
That is so interesting. What is the age difference between you and your sister?
We are 5 years apart, but it's usually they ask us if we're twins because we look very similar. So
Is wild.
yeah,
Yeah. And then, well, I don't know. This is definitely a spoiler. What's the age difference do we know between, is it Lita?
Lita. Yeah, Lita. So I think it's set in Illuminance. Yeah, it's a little spoiler if it's not. I think it's set in Illuminance, but she was born near the war and the split
Yes.
time of things,
Oh,
which was
yes.
several hundred years ago. So she's at least like 100 and 150. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's right. I remember that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's so interesting with like with authors, with writers as they are creating their story and their characters of yeah, like how they draw inspiration for some of those characters if there are any like real life like relational dynamics at play that you know what I'm saying that
Yeah.
go into their characters.
So I was
Yeah.
interested in that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there definitely is overlap, and it's usually not something that I realize until after I'm reading it through, and I'm like, oh, like this is this person in my life, and this is this person in my life. So there for sure is
Some.
relationships that I have that overlap, but it's usually not something I do intentionally, and then I just realize like, oh, like I drew this from this situation.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you feel most related to Evelina. And she's not like, I mean, she will be like the main character, right, in the
Mhm.
2.5 book, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I think and maybe as a reader, this is wrong that I do this, but sometimes I just assume like, oh gosh, I bet the writer really relates to the main character in this,
Yeah.
which is
And you know
not
what?
accurate.
Honestly, I thought that like the other podcast that I've done when I hadn't written Undying Lands yet, that was my answer. I was like, oh, obviously like I, associate myself with the main character the most because I'm in her head, I'm writing her a lot. Um,
Yeah.
but I think I wrote her the opposite of me in a lot of ways. So
Mm.
she is like a lot of like, you know, the opposite of what I'm going to do in situations. So I think that's probably why I'm really attached to the Undying Lands character, which
Mhm.
is probably because I wasn't even planning on this being a book in the series until I was like halfway through writing Illuminance when I was first drafting, and I was like, you know what? They need their own story. Like these two characters need a little novella, and then the little novella turned into like, it's a little bit longer than Lunaria is now.
Yeah. Oh gosh,
Not
I
as well.
can't wait, Kara, to read more about that dynamic. I am so excited to learn more. What was it like writing trauma into the story? Because you're right, earlier in the conversation, you were saying as like a new adult book, like there's grief,
Yeah.
obviously there's loss, there's trauma, like in different forms of trauma.
Yeah.
Um, so what was that like for
I
you?
think it's something that it can definitely be tiring. Like it's exhausting to be in that character's headspace while they're feeling these emotions because like you're feeling these emotions as you're like
Mhm.
in this character's head. Like you're thinking these things. You're feeling these feelings that you're wanting them to feel, and it's one of those things that can be really tiring. And with Lou and Illuminance, like there were short moments of those like, grief scenes, and then usually like some kind of reprieve or it moved right along, so I wasn't in that space for long. But Undying Lands it's a tragic story, so I think doing Undying Lands has kind of stretched my writing muscles in a very different way because the whole story is a lot heavier than the other books are.
Wow.
So just writing trauma, when it comes to physical trauma, when it comes to loss of a loved one, like those things are, they're hard to write, and it's something that's hard to read. And so I always put the trigger warnings like typically on my Instagram posts and on my website and things like that because it's hard to read, and some people have a hard time reading some of those different elements and things like that. So it's something that I always just want to make sure that I'm sensitive in writing them, and my beta readers are really good, my editor is really good. So I think that's one of the big things for me is just making sure that it's written in a sensitive way and that it's still true to what the character is going to be experiencing. Like, is it something that's necessary to the story? Does it shape my character? Is it unnecessary and does it need to be in there? So I think it's
Mhm.
just making sure to always check myself that this is true to the story and is necessary to the story.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and it did feel very trauma informed, and it makes sense being an occupational therapist that you
Yeah.
have some knowledge there. I know it's different than mental health therapy, but there are some overlaps. There really
Yeah.
are. Like when I've worked at a hospital and working closely with other OTs, like on the treatment team, you have to have some knowledge base for some of that. I mean, it felt
Yeah.
like it as I was reading. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of patients who go through really, really difficult
Ooh,
things, and I've had really
always.
young patients that are in their teens, and they don't have their parents there, and so there's things that you are like their family member for them because their family member can't be there because of COVID, and so it's easy to take those experiences and kind of mesh it together a little bit. Not that I'm intentionally doing it, but when I'm thinking about how would X, Y, and Z side character comfort Lou when she's going through these things. It's one of those things that you've been in the position to have to comfort somebody. So you know, like, what your character needs, and is this character going to give them that type of comfort? Because Lou has people around her in book one that don't provide the best comfort. So that's one of the hard things for her, is she doesn't have that comfort really until mostly, I feel like, into book two, probably more than anything.
Yeah, that really broke my heart reading Lunaria, and I know that really shaped her and her character, and her being so alone in life, like in the start. But I love some of the found family and some of those characters. Do you have a favorite like side character?
Oh gosh, it's so hard. I don't want to pick favorites with I feel like they're my
I
children.
sure.
I feel like a character that surprised me by becoming like one of mine that I'm really attached to is Calix in book two, which he's not even like heavily in book two. He's just like one of the
But I
side
can see that
characters.
coming. I can see that coming.
And he just like really came out of nowhere, and his personality is just like, he's the fun character to write from the
Yes,
question.
he is.
He's the
I
fun
love
one.
him.
He's very
Yes.
just like a fun antagonist. Like he really does not, like Lou in the way that Graylin does, but he knows that Graylin does, so he likes to mess with him, and he's
I love
he's a
that
really
dynamic.
fun character.
Yeah, he's really cool. When Wyverns came into it,
Yes.
I was so excited. I love a book with a good wyvern. Wyvern? Wyvern?
Yep. I say wyvern. I could be wrong.
Wyvern.
But I say
Or
wyvern.
dragon. Whatever.
Yeah.
I was telling my husband the other night, because we're watching House of Dragon. Sorry.
Yes. Oh my gosh. No, the season finale is Sunday.
We're a little bit behind. We're trying to catch up. But I just said to him, I was like, I want to have a dragon.
So I want to have one. I have one of my readers crocheted me my wyvern for me.
Oh,
And
I love it.
It's really cute. I think she's going to end up selling them at some point, but
Oh my gosh. If she's listening to this, please, I want one. I will purchase one.
I will tell her. I don't know when she's going to post them, but she did make them, and I was like, I have to look at her all the time up there.
No, I want to add it to my shelf,
Yes, I love it. I also love that, and book 2 or book 2.5 has a lot of wyverns in it. So that one, and it's going to definitely progress into 3 and 4 too. So book 2 is a taste of them, but it's gonna be a lot bigger to the plot.
Yeah, that makes sense, because it was building, towards the end of Illuminance, and I got really excited when she came out. And she showed up. I am curious too, as you've been earlier, you were talking about like all of the reading that you've done. Are there any like favorite authors that you have?
Yeah, I feel like classic wise, like Lewis Carroll is one of my favorites for sure. Alice in Wonderland, I know I used that with book 2 a little bit, but I love Alice in Wonderland. I have like 10 copies of Alice in Wonderland. It's ridiculous how many I have.
Yeah.
But that's definitely been one of my favorites, and I feel like that's kind of like a good outline for what a lot of romantasy has turned into, because it's like the human girl like discovers this world, and she falls into this world, and it's definitely something that I like really feel like heavily influences a lot of romantasy without people probably realizing that it does.
No, I agree, and I love Alice in Wonderland. That was one of my favorites as a kid. I mean, watching the Disney movie, but also the book too. Yeah, so good.
Yeah, I love it. And there's obviously, like big romantasy authors now and indie authors that I really look up to, and, traditionally published authors that I look up to. And I just feel like they've done a really good job at, just like writing certain themes and making things that are applicable to the things that happen in today's world. But I feel like they just like, a lot of authors do a really good job at passing along a message that goes deeper than like just what the book is, just the romance and things like that.
I agree with that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love it so much, is because it is an escape, but it also like the feelings are real.
Yeah.
We feel the real feels, but then it does kind of align with what is happening. It can in the real world, which I think is really interesting. So it's like a form of escape, but
kind of
Yeah,
connects with real
it's kind
life
of
stuff.
cathartic, it's things
Yeah.
that, things that are real struggles, things that we really like might be
Yeah.
struggling with. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's great.
And then what is to come for you, Kara? Like I know, so we've talked about like how many books are going to be in the series. I knew 2.5 will be coming out in October. But what are your goals as an author now and what you're hoping for?
Yeah, and I love being an indie author, and so like right now, like this series, I'm really happy with it being an indie series. I
Mhm.
haven't even really like thought about being traditionally published in any way, just because I've enjoyed the indie community so much. And so like right now, obviously, like I have to release the rest of this series, which probably will be 2025 for book 3 and 4. So I
Mhm.
have that going on, and then I also am doing a lot of book cons the end of this year and in 2025 too. So like that's a whole new thing that I have not done yet that I'm really excited
That's
about.
so exciting. Where are you
Yeah.
going
So
for book?
October of this year is, right before Undying Lands comes out, is Romantasy Con in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
So
excited
you're gonna
about that. Yes. And then I'm doing the Romantasy Con in LA in February too, which
I
is
really
I'm so
love
I've
that.
never been to LA, so I'm really excited.
So fun. You're really gonna
Yeah.
be
And
going like coast to coast.
they're so, and I feel like I overcommitted to them, but I also want to do like all of the things, and I just want to go to all of them. So I have that in February, and then I'm doing Imaginarium. I think Imaginarium in DC is in July. I'm pretty sure it's in July. And then I'm doing a new one that's in North Carolina, so it's really close to me. That one's called Off the Page, and it's just a ball, so
Cool.
it's just that day. I think they're doing it, so they're gonna have authors doing signings, but the guests will be doing like the whole thing, like the ball, like the author buying books, things like that. Um, and then Villains and Vixens in Texas as well.
Yes. That's
Yeah.
so exciting. A lot of authors
Yeah.
are gonna be there. That's so, and
Yeah.
this is the first year for them, right?
It is, and they really have like blown up. It feels like this. I
They
have a ton
have.
of like all of the author friends that I mentioned earlier. We're all going to be at that one in Texas, and I'm super, super excited for
Oh,
it.
that's so exciting. And then to see like your people in real life, like
Yes, and all these like readers that I've been, because do you have a Discord? Have you been in
I
Discord?
yes, okay, so I just got into it
Oh
after
yeah.
like so I joined like the Bookstagram world I think in April and it's just sort of like
Ooh,
my mind. I
that's
know
recent.
it's insane. I know. Maybe it was end of March. Whatever. And so I my husband has Discord with like his video game friends.
Yeah.
And so I've asked him so many questions about Discord. And he's like, "You've got Discord now?" I've got so many channels because I'm like, it's so cool. It's so fun, but like being involved in all these different groups.
Yeah,
So
it's really fun how the book community has like shifted to this like group chat,
yeah,
Discord, like hangout. It's because I had no idea what Discord was either, and I joined a book club on Discord. And this was before I published Lunaria, and I was like, there were so many different channels, and like, why is there a channel for this and a different channel for this? And it's crazy,
yes,
but I'm very excited to meet like all of my like little Discord readers, and we talk so much. So I'm excited for that.
that'll be so fun. Maybe I'll join your. I don't have a Discord for this, not yet, but maybe someday.
Yeah.
But it is so fun, like connecting with authors on there. So
Mhm.
maybe I'll join yours.
Yes, please do. It's and it always definitely gets busier closer to release date. So it's fun, like readers getting to talk to each other while they're arc reading the book. And I have a street team channel too. So just like getting to announce things in there is really fun. And like having people to like be excited with you is just like a whole nother feeling.
Yeah, that is so cool. I've just had the honor of being on a few like street teams, which I've obviously
Mhm.
never experienced before. I'm pretty new to all of this, but it is such an honor. I love it. It's such a joy to be able to support and celebrate you guys as authors, and especially like these books that I love so much because I don't know, it's just they're amazing
Yeah.
words. But yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Kara, anything else that you want to share for um, the listener, for your readers?
Not anything life changing. I'm just really excited to see where the series goes. It's crazy that it hasn't even been a year. It'll be a year in, like 2 weeks, but I'm really excited just to see where it goes. And I always want to preface or end it either way with saying, if anybody ever want to DMs me, if they want to talk to me, like, I'm super excited to talk to people. I know some people are nervous and like they think it's weird. They might, they don't want to come across as weird, and I'm like, you know what? I'm super weird too. It's okay. Like, please come and talk to me, message me. Like, I am super excited when people take the time to reach out to me. So please reach out to me if you ever want to.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then actually, I was going to ask you real fast. So you do want to say, I mean, you love the indie world, but do you have any ideas for other series? Or are you focusing right now on this series and then you'll consider others?
I feel like I always have like a ton of ideas running. But right now, planned for, end of 2026 is the spinoffs for this world. So they're new books and they're new characters. They have some characters that we might be reading about right now, but they're going to be like complete spinoffs, but still set in the same world. So like my heart is still like so tied to this world. I'm like, I can't think about a whole new, series yet because I don't want to leave this world. So definitely the next after this series is to work on the spinoffs that'll be happening.
That is so exciting. That's awesome. Well, everyone, you can find more information about Kara. Like she said, she's on Instagram. She has a Discord. She has a website, karadouglasauthor.com. And like I said earlier, I ordered her books through my local bookstore. So you could do that. Or, where do you prefer? I don't know any other places to find your books. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. Either way, you can do Barnes & Noble online, Amazon, Kindle Unlimited, and I do sometimes post signed copies on Etsy too. So usually joining my newsletter is usually the easiest way, or seeing it on Instagram because I'll post it on there too. I probably won't sell any until after the release of Undying Lands, so I can post that one too. But usually I'll periodically post on Etsy, on my Etsy account. I have stickers on my Etsy account and stuff too, but I'll do the signed copies occasionally as well.
That's awesome. Will there be any like special editions there? Or
so for the one in October, I'm going to be doing annotated copies, so it will be the same cover, but I'll be like hand annotating all of them, so you can pre-order it in the link in my bio on Instagram. But definitely the October one will be the annotated copies, but there may be some special editions coming for the 2025 BookCon.
Everybody keep an eyeball out. Awesome. Well, Kara, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me and sharing with everybody like your love for writing and us learning more about you. And so yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks. I was really glad to be able to do this and be able to chat. It was a lot of fun talking with you. So
thanks, Kara.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode with romance fantasy author Kara Douglas. Again, she wrote Lunaria and Illuminance, books 1 and 2 of her new romance fantasy series, the Unraveled Fate Series. Book 2.5, Undying Lands, will be released October 17th, 2024, so keep an eye out for that. You can find more information about her on her Instagram, her website, karadouglasauthor.com. You can find her books at any major book retailer or order through your indie bookstore or local library. Again, thank you guys for listening to this podcast focused on celebrating and promoting authors who write fanciful stories that make my heart sing. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Romantasy Library. There are many more to come with amazing authors, as well as deep dives into various writing processes, general life conversations, some spicy spice, obviously mental health discussions, favorite tropes, and many, many tangents. If you're feeling generous, please feel free to leave a 5-star rating and review. Thank you so much for being here and for helping to celebrate these amazing authors. See you guys next week.